How you living? No putts given. Tony, Chris, we're back. We have a guest. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Happy to. Thanks for having me. Jeremy Stone. I work at Titleist. My job is to work on the marketing and the sales of our golf balls. Get to dabble in some of the other categories we work on, but primarily my focus is golf balls.
And where are we? Because people are going to ask. I love Tony likes to do this. He looks behind us so everybody can't see what's behind us. But
no, I want to be reminded. Why don't I have a golf club?
I know. We're going to go hit some wedge shots here in a little bit.
The biggest risk to us doing this here is that I might just leave and go hit shots. We are at the newly renovated Titleist Performance Center at Manchester Lane. So we have a test facility right near our headquarters. This is a 15-minute drive from headquarters at Fairhaven. This is where we do any manner of testing, player testing, club testing, ball testing. We do consumer fittings out here as well. And we just renovated the property with a new building. But we are sitting in the short game area, which is like this little isolated slice of heaven if you're into short game.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So new building, if you can see that behind us, $14 million build out total, all sorts of cool stuff. We toured in there. This area, you got about, 100 yards or so, little par 3 area, but short game testing.
And the thing I'll call out
areas.
as we're looking around here, you're right, you can stretch it to 100 yards, you're hitting into a green, you've got the sod-faced bunkers, you can hit different shots. But you see the strips of rough. This is because, one, if you're getting fit, you need to be able to hit different variety of shots. But two, as we're doing different types of testing, whether it's groove testing or whether we're doing golf ball testing, you want to be able to understand what the impact is out of the rough as well as out of the fairway from a variety of distances. And so the design of this property was really made to allow us to do any type of testing that might be necessary.
I missed with the mower.
I actually thought you did that just specifically for Tony. So when we're doing ball fitting and stuff, like, we can be in our home environment.
This is where you're going to be.
In the rough, about 50 yards from the green.
We didn't grow up the fescue tall enough to operate where you guys might like to operate, so we'll work on that for
certainly
next time.
Not where we typically are. But what we're really talking about today, besides that, is two things today. Number one, best local ice cream shops. We got to cover that. And two, you guys came out with the new golf ball. It is, again, kind of the standard within the industry. It's the new Pro V1 and Pro V1X. We're going to dive into all of that stuff. Start with this, though. If you had to go get ice cream right now, where are you going?
Yeah, so speed to market, right? If I'm thinking about desperate need for ice cream, the Acushnet Creamery is pretty much at the end of Manchester Lane.
Yeah,
delightful.
Top 5.
Delightful.
It's top 5 on my list all time.
How many times have you stopped there this visit?
Not nearly enough.
Okay.
Not nearly enough.
That's why his Uber is going to try and get it.
That's why my Uber's 5 minutes early, so I can hit that on the way out, and that's what's going to happen. But let's talk some golf balls. Let's start with just big picture stuff. 2025, what are we coming out with? And let's kind of start high level and we'll dive deep.
Absolutely. 25 Pro V1. If you're interested in golf ball performance, we've got a golf ball that's faster, gives you more control with the irons, more spin with the wedges. It does all of these things while maintaining the relationship, flight, spin, and feel between Pro V1 and Pro V1X.
You said faster, which I'm going to assume means potentially more distance, but faster.
More control.
And
more spin with the wedges.
And more spin around the green, which, this sounds a lot like what people want every time a new ball comes out. Hey, all I want you to do is give me a little more distance off the tee, but a little bit more control around the green. So it sounds like same stuff we've been working on, but different answers, or?
Yeah, so look, this is the 25th anniversary of Pro V1, which is kind of a big moment for our business. And the original promise of Pro V1, when you think about it, when you date back to the late 90s, golfers had to make a choice. They had to make a choice between tour level control, which at the time was offered by Titleist Professional, wound construction urethane cover, or you could get low spin and distance with a solid core construction. At the time we were making Pinnacle, we were making HVC, we had a couple of other models coming out of our ball plant too. Pro V1 married up the two. And so what was the distance choice or the control choice got married into one. We've simply been trying to improve upon that recipe for 25 years. We follow the tour player. We listen to them, we understand what they need, and that creates the opportunity for consistent performance improvement. This cycle, it just so happened, we were asked to deliver more spin on the scoring shots, right? So tour players said, like, hey, the first thing they say is don't change a thing. It's just not in our DNA.
Make it better, but don't change anything.
That's right. So you have to dig deeper. We have an awesome team. 40 Pitts does an awesome job with his tour team, almost translating what a tour player asks for. And the tour players essentially said, look, I love it off the tee. I love the spin. I love how you've got kind of distance and spin kind of dialed and finely tuned. But if you could get me a little more spin greenside, if you could get me a little more spin with those scoring irons, that would be great. Now the trick to that is, can you decouple spin in one part of the game from the other? Because a golf ball is the only piece of equipment you're using on every shot. And a lot of times when you make a change over on one side of the bag, it has unintended consequences over here. What the engineers were able to do through core chemistry is figure out a way to deliver the spin in the short game, keep the low spin in the long game.
So no promise of lower spin off the driver. That's
Nope.
long game. You didn't want to go there. You say more spin. What are we talking about? Can you put a number on it?
Yeah, so we're talking about player dependent, couple hundred RPM of spin, and then it depends on kind of where you are from a speed perspective. It also depends on the type of shot you're hitting. But if you're starting to think like 8-iron, 9-iron, pitching wedge, full swing, you're going to look at a couple hundred RPM more spin. And then where tour players really start to recognize a difference is as you get into the long irons, that's where you start to see the spin continue to benefit us, is the ability to hold a 5-iron or a 6-iron, but also then not have it drift too deep into the drivers and the fairway woods. That's kind of the magic of how you create different core chemistries, different gradients within the core, how it mixes with the casing layer and the cover. But a couple hundred RPM can make all the difference based on a given shot. It can change your angle of descent. It can change your stopping power.
So with that, and we use the term spin slope. That's one we talk about, kind of, nerd talk, industry kind of talk stuff. But what we're really talking about is we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want low spin off a driver, because that's going to generally help us with distance. Not too low spin, but in general, less spin off the driver can be a good thing, more spin around the greens, and we kind of talk about that as that spin slope. So going from lower spin to higher spin. How did you improve that, this 25 version versus the 23 version? How did you give us even a better relationship between those two?
Yeah, so not a lot of people think about the core when they think about spin, right? A lot of times we think about spin, we instantly go to the urethane cover. But the reality is spin comes from the relationship between the different layers of the golf ball, and it comes from the strike. And so we look at every single shot that's got to be hit, and we're going to evaluate in that spin slope. While it's marketing guy here thinks of it as a very linear thing, it actually has some curves along the way that the R&D team is constantly evaluating. And so what we did for this cycle, and it's really a combination of what's been happening the last few cycles, is we knew we had some benefits from 21. We introduced a softer urethane cover. And then we introduced a high gradient core in 23. And now we're actually able to change that high gradient core and change the chemistry, change some of the batch mixture of what you're putting into that core chemistry in the molding process.
We're making a cake
mixture, that's right. And what you end up with is that high gradient, which essentially means you're softer in the middle, gets firmer as you go to the outer edge. You do that in a very precise way, and if you're able to change that gradient, you get a hard over soft relationship, which keeps the spin low in the long game, right? So you talked about driver. How did you keep it low? You do that through the high gradient, because you're talking about now a very direct strike with a low lofted club, typically at higher speeds. And so that high gradient core, or in the case of Provo X, the dual core, helps us keep the spin down. And as you get into the shorter clubs, because you have that firmer outer edge, you start ending up with a softer urethane cover over the top of a firmer casing layer or a firmer outer core. And that relationship is what's going to create the higher spin, particularly with the wedges and the short irons. Because of that high gradient and because of that chemical change and that molding change that we've made, we kept it with the driver, improved it with the wedges.
Pro V1, right, in terms, we talked about spin, talked about speed. Flight, though, it's going to fly through pretty much the same window as the previous model, correct?
Correct. You're going to get the same flight. The aerodynamic package of dimple pattern, the 388 dimple pattern, remains the same. You might see like a tick higher simply because when you add spin, you increase lift coefficient. That might drive the ball up a little bit. But for a lot of golfers, it's going to look in the exact same window. And most of the tour player feedback to date has been, I love the window. Provo X comes down just a little bit, but Provo X remains the higher flying golf ball.
I want to go back to the core thing for a second, because we talked about core gradients, right? You said, you got the core right in the middle of the golf ball. At one point in time, that was just kind of one thing. And when you're talking about gradients within the core, saying taking the middle and allowing that to be softer, right? And as you go from the middle of the core out to the outer part of the core, that becomes harder.
It's a lava cake, man.
It's a lava cake or snickerdoodle. I feel like it's a snickerdoodle cookie. was there ever any thought about looking at cookies?
I just wasn't sure if you were wanting me to go down the snickerdoodle pathway or the core pathway. I'm good either way.
Aren't they one and the same? I mean, or is that too simplistic of a way to think about it? Or is
it's exactly the right way to think about it. When you do compression molding, you can go anywhere from a 0 gradient all the way to a high gradient. You can do low, mid, high gradient. And that is going to change the relationship based on the strike. And so all these things have to be specifically designed into the construction of the golf ball, or you're going to have outcomes you might not want. And the easiest way I would say this, and one of the things we've enjoyed spending time with you all and your readers, is there's this myth that soft is going to generate spin, right? A soft golf ball is going to spin more, right? And that's because a lot of golfers, I think about that cover. And yes, that's true. A soft urethane cover, all things being equal, is going to generate spin. But a soft golf ball, if you go soft compression under a soft urethane, it's actually going to be the low spin golf ball like our AVX.
Right.
And then you go to a firmer golf ball like a Pro V1X, and it's all because of the relationship, soft urethane over a firmer casing layer. That's going to drive spin rates up. But you have to then use the gradient of the core to make sure that you don't just have a spin slope that's super flat through the bag, because you don't want high spin on the driver.
Right.
So what about Pro V1X, right? How has that ball evolved from 23 to now 2025?
So we went same exact approach. Out on tour, what are you looking for? And what we found is that prior generations of Pro V1X, in particular the 21 model, really was a bit of a ceiling on tour for most Pro V1X players. So they kind of said, like, don't go higher than that one, but I need more than you're giving me in 23. And so now you've got a little bit of a needle to thread. And the team was able to do that. And so similarly, we're looking at core chemistry, but in this case, you now have more levers to play with. Because you have a dual core, you can start looking at, okay, what is the gradient relationship within the solid center core? What is the gradient relationship between the inner core and the outer core? And then how does that relate to the casing layer and the cover? And so when you put all of that together, core chemistry continued to be the best way to deliver the short game spin. We were able to get increased speed because our tolerances got a little bit tighter in our molding process through process improvement. We did have to make a minor aerodynamic change to bring it down a little bit, and that was due to offset some of the speed we put in the ball speed elements. So we're able to kind of mix and match the different performance components, give you the spin green side, keep the flight relationship with Pro V1 so that you've got fitting options, but deliver a better golf ball for the player.
So still the higher flying one, but just a tick lower, is that fair?
Yeah, so what you're going to look at is the relationship. Pro V1 is more of our mid-flight, and in the premium space, mid-spin. Pro V1X flies higher with more spin. It does come down if you were to hit 23 and 25 side by side, but they might be the same because, again, like Pro V1, as you add spin, your lift goes up, you might get a little more. So most players are saying it's a similar window, maybe a touch lower. It might be kind of in that same aerodynamic window as Dash now.
You brought it up.
You said the magic word.
Let's talk about how you have failed me.
In how many ways?
So many ways.
We only got about 20 minutes left here, so it's...
I was hoping, I know some people watching this were hoping, it has been, you brought Left Dash to market, brought it into the full lineup, how many years ago now?
2018 is when Dash made its debut on the PGA Tour. As a concept, as a tool, it came to life at the end of 2017 and really kind of became more available and more generally available in the marketplace within the last couple of years.
And you're not making a new one yet.
Working on it.
Emphasis on yet.
So, hey.
Let's have the Left Dash update, please.
I will join all of you looking for the new Left Dash because I am a Left Dash player. I describe myself as suboptimal at impact. I generate too much spin through the bag.
We're all suboptimal.
Well, that's fair. All in different ways.
In so many
my
ways.
way happens to be too much spin. So everything I do is try to reduce my spin because I hate seeing a 9-iron come off the front of a green. And so Dash helps me do that. I love Left Dash, and we're constantly looking at ways to improve. The reality is we got pretty close about a year ago. And our process, what we went through for 25 Pro V1 and Pro V1X, what we go through for every single one of our Pro V1 models is we're going to look around and say, okay, what is the goal of this golf ball? What are we trying to achieve? Pro V1, it was more spin in the short game, more spin with the irons, keep the spin with the driver. With Dash, we went out and talked to players and they said, well, gee, what are the two things we think about? So Tony, you're a player. What are the two things you want to see in Left Dash?
I would be happy with just more greenside spin. That would be it. I would be fine.
And some players would say, I want more screen side spin, maybe softer feel, because it is our firmest golf ball.
I'm fine with the feel.
Okay, you and me both. I'm not a feel guy. If I can get the right performance, I'll put up with whatever I'm feeling. But we made a golf ball. And we made a golf ball that, actually we made a handful of different golf balls, took them out to the tour, took them to dash players out on tour. What we found is we achieved your goal. We were able to get some more short game spin. But what happened is, again, that idea of unintended consequences. We found that as the players moved back into different parts of the game, 8-iron, 9-iron, the shots I was talking about struggling with, it just as they said it, the words from the tour players were, this just isn't a dash. And so we went back to the drawing board. And the reality is we're not going to bring something to market unless it's better. And in this case, from how dash players define success, it was not a better golf ball. So we're still working on it. R&D went right back to work. I've seen some options floating around the labs. I'm thankful you didn't pocket any when you were in there.
How do you know he didn't?
We've got people.
They have cameras.
They have cameras. They have cameras.
Hard at work, and I promise you, as an avowed Dash user, that it is top of my mind at least. How do we make a better Dash?
I think what's interesting about that too is, and you mentioned this, the process, right? And so maybe we can talk through that a little bit. And we talk about 2-year cycles, and that's been pretty consistent, right? 2001, 3, 5, 7.
Except for left dash.
Except for left dash. We know
Just saying.
that those odd numbered years, it's time for likely time for a new Pro V1 and or Pro V1X, not left dash. How does that work over those 2 years? Like, what does that? You kind of ran us through this before, but I think people find it interesting. Like, what does this process look like? And it's a little more exhaustive than I was maybe anticipating.
Yeah, it's
How
fun.
long does it take to redesign a side stamp? Like,
That's the subtext.
We actually do testing on the side stamp. We do surveys with tour players throughout Tour, LPGA, PGA Tour, Korn Ferry Tour. I'll have to show you the survey data. It's fascinating. Most of them, it's similar. Just don't change a thing. Minimize the amount of change.
Yeah.
But believe it or not, we always make a change to the golf ball. So we are always looking for process improvements, performance improvements. And yeah, our process, where does 2 years come from, right? You'll find it's consistent with our club's business as well. And the timeline comes from R&D. They would tell you anything less than 2 years, we probably can't make it meaningfully better, which is principally important to our business. That's how we like to go to market. We want to tell you it's better. We want to be able to prove to you that it's better. It takes 2 years to do that. And that's because you have to go through the prototyping process. And for us, what's really neat, and again, this is what I do. I oversimplify what the R&D team does, which is highly complicated. There's kind of two groups of engineers. There's the group down there that are disconnected from product. So you've got a group of engineers who are the chemistry folks who are sitting there figuring out core chemistries, which is kind of what we're talking about today with 25. They're just sitting around all day trying to figure out what are the different elements that we can do to change and create unique characteristics of core.
But they're not trying to hit a deadline.
They're not trying to hit a deadline. They're just trying to make better core technology. And then you've got folks who are looking at casing layer materials. You've got folks looking at different urethanes. You have an entire aerodynamics team constantly testing new aerodynamics. We're probably testing and developing 30 to 50 new aerodynamic designs every year, and we're optimizing them. And then what happens is you have a team that is connected to our 2-year cycle, and they're coming along saying, okay, how do I make Pro V1 better? They get feedback from the tour. They get what we call the North Star in the tour. And the tour says, all right, here's the North Star for Pro V1. And that process engineering group is going to go to each of those groups, and they're going to say, okay, how do I achieve our goal? And they'll kind of pick up some pieces from the core team or the casing team or the cover team or the aero team, and they'll go start making golf balls, putting it all together and seeing what works. And the starting point is, can we make it? So we go look at the physical properties. What has to come true for this to become a golf ball? And then the second stage, once you figure out that, oh, well, here's a handful, maybe a dozen, that we think might work, we take them over here to Manchester Lane and we hit them with a robot. And that narrows it down even further to what achieved the North Star. And that robot is a very fast way to understand across a number of different clubs. Did we achieve the North Star of delivering spin in the short game, keeping spin in the long game, maintaining distance, maintaining flight windows, all the different attributes golfers have come to love? And that narrows us down to now you're in like 3 or 4 different candidates, maybe 3 or 4 for each golf ball. You might have like 3 Pro V1 candidates, 3 Pro V1X. That's when 40 Pitts and his team take them out to the tours and they test. And we do player testing because players play golf, robots hit golf balls. Subtle difference, but important. Because as you start hitting shots, you need to see everything, right? You look at the different shots you could create around here. Golf ball has to work for all of them. And we learn a lot about those 3 candidates, all of which achieve the North Star on a robot. Usually one emerges as the favorite of tour players. And so that then becomes, okay, this is new Pro V1. That's when we then transition into the ball plant and say, great, we've got this prototype. Now we have to learn how to make it to scale and make it consistently so that shot after shot, you get the performance you're expecting.
You talk about kind of bringing those final 3 or 2 or 3 to tour players and getting the feedback, and ultimately the decision is driven by the tour player. What's the split on the vote there? Is it typically like, all right, 80-20, 90-10, or is it like 55, 45?
The good news is a lot of times the vote is, sometimes you get like, gosh, these are all pretty good. And I could
Thanks for nothing, guys.
Yeah, exactly right. Well,
Appreciate
gee, that took a while to end up with the answer right where we were. You do end up with split votes, right? And a lot of times the tiebreaker gets determined kind of by the collective, right?
World ranking, the top guy, highest at the time makes the call.
Sometimes over 70% of the tour is playing our golf ball. We can't really just cherry pick the 1 or 2 that are most important. We've got to understand what is going to fit the vast majority, but that is the role of CPOs. That's how Dash came about is, hey, if we've made a variant of this golf ball that just doesn't fit your needs, we are going to make sure that we fit your needs. That's what fitting is all about. That's what 40 does each and every day with the various options he has out on tour. And so it's inevitable that, look, 25 Pro V1, Pro V1 X is going to be the number 1 and number 2 models on tour. That is a reality based on the performance we see and the seeding we've seen out on tour thus far. But inherently, there will be golfers who need something unique, and we're there for them as well. That's what fitting is for. That's what these different flight, spin, feel options are for. And so the decision ends up coming down to, what do we think best fits the market? In this case, we had a golf ball and a candidate that achieved our North Star and got us more speed. Very few golfers say to us, no thanks on the speed, I'm good. And so that became a really nice tiebreaker for us, is this one option over here, it gave us a speed lever to pull. And so we went ahead and went down that direction. And that's where, at the end of the day, once we have the tour player feedback, we also are going to look at market dynamics and golfers who have to play the golf balls every day out in the consumer marketplace.
What do you think, so season's going to be starting here in a little bit, different parts of the country. It's warming up, hopefully. And
it's so weird because we're shooting this so far ahead of
well,
launch.
I know, but I'm projecting. I'm putting myself in that
It's going to get colder, but then it'll be warm.
It will.
All
right, so let's say I play a Pro V1 right now. I just go buy the new Pro V1? If I play Pro V1 X right now, like, am I going to, for people who are looking like, what?
If I play left dash,
I'm not going to go test. I'm not going to do this. I just want to know which ball should I buy.
If you play left dash, it's still spectacular. You're going to love it.
Exactly.
Yeah, the beauty of us striving and understanding what golfers are using, and that's where we take data from our tour level fitting team and our new fitting app, is we understand what the needs are. And right, what you end up happening is you kind of have the needs of golfers, and they tend to overlap a little bit. For the vast majority of players, if you love your Pro V1, go play Pro V1. If you love your Pro V1 X, go play Pro V1 X. There are going to be those folks in the middle ground who, let's say you're a player who plays Pro V1 X currently for the spin properties of X, but you're like, gosh, I wish I could flight it a little lower, or I wish it wasn't so firm. New Pro V1, because it has some more spin, particularly in those scoring shots, that might be the type of player who opts and makes a switch in this moment. We don't see a ton of switching on tour. We tend to see like for like, Pro V1 to Pro V1, X to X, but there are always players who are in between models, and a new introduction can move them from one place to another.
So if I'm a Pro V1 X player, I might consider Pro V1 if I need a little lower trajectory.
If you're looking for lower trajectory, more piercing trajectory, or if you just don't like that firm feel, the added spin of Pro V1 might just get you there. Similarly, if you're a Pro V1 player, but you've been kind of figuring out, hey, how do I hit a higher ball? You might then look at an X because it's going to give you that option. You've just got to understand, really, flight, spin, feel. Those are the 3 characteristics. In that order, that's a performance-based order, and figure out which ball is right for you.
Big picture design approach, right? Over the years, driver category in particular, we've seen evolution from, going back to when the first Pro V1 hit the market, right? The idea of a low spin driver didn't really exist for the most part. And so now we've seen, not only low spin drivers as a specific example, but just a wider range of options in that category, but also within irons and other clubs. So to what extent does the development of a golf ball, is it almost reactive to what goes on in the club market?
It's a bit of iterative, right? Because it's not reactive only because we're very lucky, right? Dr. Chuck out on the West Coast is talking to Mike Madsen here on the East Coast.
We don't say his name. We don't. It's against the rules. He wishes to remain nameless. I don't know why.
All right.
This guy.
Great.
This guy.
We've got two awesome leaders who talk to each other, leading our R&D departments. And what's amazing about that group is they're talking together all the time about what is the future development cycle? What's the 5-year plan for clubs? What's the 5-year plan for golf balls? And we're able to then look at that and understand, how does it all fit? At the end of the day, it's the same golfer, right? So a golfer needs 14 clubs and a golf ball to go play this game successfully. The ideal scenario and what follows the tour players is get fit for your irons, understand your iron play, get fit for your golf ball. That's going to help you understand exactly how your irons and your scoring shots play into the green. Then go get fit for the driver, because any of our premium offerings, we're going to be able to fit you for a GT driver that optimizes your distance. Because of our ability to change the head model, to change the SureFit setting, to fit you for the right shaft, you put all that together, we will maximize your distance. And so the moral of that story is, we're constantly working together to understand what's coming so that you have complementary pieces of the puzzle, because they have to work together so far. And the advice is get fit.
What is, just switching gears to kind of last topic here. One, thank you for not raising the price on them. I'm sure a lot of people are very happy about that, but that got me thinking a little bit about, right, it's a competitive marketplace. The industry is hyper competitive in a lot of spaces. Obviously, I would say golf balls have become more competitive, not less competitive, with multiple manufacturers. We saw some really cool charts before. You mentioned the number 70% as a PGA Tour usage number, winning counts, retail market share, all those things. When you guys sit down and you talk internally, what does success look like with this ball? I know you're proud of what the product is. That's evident in terms of getting to this point. But what does it look like on the other side in terms of usage, adoption rates, sales, all that kind of stuff? How will you know if it's been successful in those places?
Yeah, so there's the scorecard, right? There's the KPIs that we'll look at, and that starts on tour, right? Have we developed a golf ball that quickly becomes the new number 1 and number 2 models on tour, Pro V1 and Pro V1 X? We have every expectation that they are the number 1 and number 2 used golf ball on the worldwide professional tours. So that's one unit of measure that we can look at. At the end of the day, it all kind of dates back to why we're here as a company. We're here because Phil Young, our founder, said we need to reward great swings. It's all we try to do each and every day. Can we make a better, more consistent golf ball so that when any of us make a good swing, you get the result you anticipate? And so we start to reveal that and unlock that for golfers through the fitting process. And that's really the best way for us to measure success. And so we consistently look at fitting data from our tour level fitters, from our fitting app, and from our virtual fittings to understand, hey, are people being fit in the right golf ball, and the testimonials that come back. It's a very qualitative unit of measure, but extraordinarily valuable and extraordinarily rewarding when you see that you've created performance that a golfer didn't even know was possible, right? We hear so often, I'm not good enough to play Pro V1. The reality is you got not good enough not to. And you can unlock some performance through equipment choices that you might not have known was available to you. That's truly the best unit of measure.
I want to cycle back. You talk about fitting, and this, I think this will be good for people to hear. You and I have talked about this before, but you have a new ball fitting app, relatively new. We're going to get fit for golf balls here in a minute to see what the new stuff is right for us. But currently, what is the most fit ball when you bring in amateur golfers? What does Titleist fit more amateurs than anything else?
Yeah, so when you look at tour level fitting, and we used our tour level fitters who've been out in the world now for 7-8 years with serious focus and depth, And you compare that data with our ball fitting app, that was our validation point. They're both the same, and Pro V1 X is the #1 recommended golf ball when we go out and do fittings. And then Pro V1's the second most recommended.
So, but that's what I want to get at. The X, I think that surprises people because it is a higher compression offering. And so much of what we've talked about and fought against is this idea of like, all right, I swing 80 miles an hour, therefore I need a soft golf ball.
I'm not fast enough to play the X.
Your fitting data says no. Like even for slower swing players, Pro V1 X is the one that comes up most often. Why is that?
As we think about what are we trying to achieve, go back, what are our goals and objectives? Goals and objectives are to shoot lower scores. Best way to do that, hit more greens, hit it closer to the hole. A lot of amateur golfers are struggling to hit the ball with enough height and spin to stop the ball on the green. And so X, which is our higher flying, higher spinning golf ball, gives you that opportunity. It is the #1 model played on the LPGA Tour, and LPGA compared to PGA Tour is slower average speeds, and it's because most of the players out there are looking for height and spin to be able to stop the golf ball close to the green. That's control, and that's the ability to hit the shots you need and want to score. So that's why it's our #1 fit golf ball. Is most amateurs kind of need to understand what true height looks like, right? And we're trying to optimize our scoring potential, not just overall distance. And you look at club fittings, I think one thing that has challenged amateurs in the past is when you go out and do an iron fitting and you purchase the model that just gets you the most distance. But is it a playable distance, right? Our team talks about distance, descent, and dispersion. We want to understand how we're able to optimize that through the bag. And that's why X ends up being the most played. It's not about swing speed. That's not a metric that we're going to use to fit you. But swing speed absolutely contributes to your ability to hit the shots you need to. And so we're just going to fine tune, but we're going to focus on scoring shots.
There you go.
I love it. I love it. Any final questions? It's a lot of information.
I did want to ask one more thing.
You can ask one more thing.
Give you a chance to talk about this. You know, we've talked about, we've written about extensively over the last several years. Your two major competitors in the golf ball space have invested a combined, by their numbers, over $200 million on quality and process improvements, right? Some cool printing things as well in that mix. What are you guys doing to maintain your quality advantage or grow it? Whatever, like what steps are you taking on the quality front? Or are you just going, we're cool, we're good?
We're good.
No, it's much like when tour players say, don't change a thing. That just doesn't work for us, right? We have a group of engineers in R&D and in our operations centers that are wired for constant improvement. And it's really mirrors what we see out on tour. You go to a great elite coach or you go listen to a player, the #1 buzzword you're going to hear in a post-round interview is, I'm just going to trust my process, right? We've all heard that language. We've heard the 1% better every day idea. And so we constantly are looking at that compound interest. We're constantly making investments, and those investments might range from how do we make a better dual core molding process? How do we create a better printing environment so that we can put alignment features on a golf ball that are precisely aligned so that they're doing what you're hoping for when you're trying to better line up a putt on the greens. And so everything we're doing is very much a constant innovation. 25 years of Pro V1, we have constantly been building innovations on top of one another, and in the process, in parallel, constantly strive for performance improvements. The speed improvement we have is simply because we've gotten tighter tolerances in our ability to control speed, which means we can make the entire population of our golf balls faster. That's a huge competitive advantage when you have tighter tolerances, because it gives you the ability to now push up against the limits and understand how you can maximize distance for the golfer while still giving them the control they need. So it's a constant investment in our business. It's been going on for over 90 years. That mission has remained the same, and it's elegantly simple. Doesn't mean it's easy.
Great place to finish.
Yeah.
Any other final questions?
No, that was my last and final.
That's good. But you may have questions. There's going to be plenty of questions out there. Please, 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 we'll give you Jeremy's cell phone number. We'll post it in the comments below. You can text him and call him anytime. Nah, I'm just kidding. But you can reach out. Please let us know.
Yeah.
Book a virtual fitting. Our fitting team would love to answer all your questions. That's the move.
There you go. Company guy, good work.
Tell Jeremy you want a new left dash, like he's the guy.
New left dash. Until next time, we're out.